Hi, everyone. It's Joanne. Before we dive into today's episode, please hit subscribe and give this episode a thumbs up. I've got to be honest. When I first saw the term dressage, I didn't get it. I was sitting there watching and wondering, wait, is this a sport? What am I supposed to be looking out for? There was hardly any commentary from the commentator as well. So on the surface, it seems like this really slow, quiet dance between the horse and the rider. But there's something about horses that intrigued me. They seem to carry this emotional depth, something we as humans connect with easily. Maybe because of the stories that I've read or the movies that I've watched growing up. When I was younger, horses were my favorite animals, and I always wished I had one of my own. There's something steadfast yet free-spirited about them. In some ways, I think I still identify with that energy. So I tossed the idea of speaking to Caroline Chu, Singapore's very own Olympic dressage rider, to the team and wondered whether we're going to be able to get her on our show. I mean, I'm curious not just about the sport itself, but more importantly, about how working with horses has shaped her life. Has being around them taught her something she doesn't even realize she carries with her now? Something that has become a part of who she is? So without further ado, let's dive into her journey both on and off the saddle. Hi, Caroline. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I know you have a very busy schedule, so I think we're very lucky to be able to have you in the studio today to share with us a little bit about what your sport is about, because I'm just completely clueless when I was watching your event, and there was hardly any commentary on the side as well. So I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be looking out for or what is exciting about dressage. So maybe you can start by letting our listeners know what the sport is about.
Of course. So dressage is admittedly a really niche sport.
Right.
Fundamentally, it's about a really harmonious relationship between a horse and a rider. So much so that we kind of carry out a really complicated routine without anyone seeing any signals. That's why it's actually quite difficult to watch sometimes, because the less you see a horse rider kind of give a horse signals, the better they actually are. So at the Olympics, the more graceful it is, the more subtle the signals, the better you're going to do. In terms of the technical aspect of dressage, I usually describe it as ballet, but with horses. So you have all of these very difficult movements that you have to do with the horse. So you have to do pirouettes, you have to do kind of sideways sort of steps. You've got to do a very elevated trot on the spot. These are all things that you've got to execute with your horse. And that's very similar to sort of ballet or even ice skating, I think.
How do you get marks on it? Like, is there a time frame that you need to complete the moves? And are the judges looking at you or looking at the horse or looking at both of you? Like, how does that work?
So the judges are looking at the complete picture. It's the horse and rider combination. And you've got to do a set routine, and each movement is scored out of 10. So at the Olympic Games, there are like 33 compulsory movements. Everyone is scored out of 10. And at the end of that, you get a percentage mark.
Do you have to finish the routine within a certain time?
There's no hard and fast rule. You're basically expected to complete it between sort of 8.5 to 9 minutes. But, every horse and rider might take a slightly different amount of time because horses are all different. They move slightly differently. So I guess you get a maximum window of 10 minutes, but otherwise you just complete the routine. And that is actually for the preliminary round of the Olympics. There are slightly different formats as you progress through.
I think there's also another event that involves the horses. It's like you have to sort of do hurdles or something?
Yes, so dressage is one of 3 Olympic disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that involves hurdles is called showjumping.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you kind of, you've got 12 to 14 obstacles and you have to clear them within a very short amount of time. And then the third of those disciplines is called eventing. And that combines show jumping, dressage, and a discipline called cross country, where you jump over logs or into lakes. They're not specialists in the same way, but they do more different things.
Did I read somewhere that you used to do the hurdles one and then you switched?
So when I was a bit younger, I competed in the Youth Olympic Games. And that was in Singapore in 2010. And at that point, I did do show jumping.
So what made you decide to go into dressage instead of sticking to show jumping?
To be completely honest, I think I was more a dressage rider. And I actually picked up show jumping because there was this very unique opportunity to compete in like a home Youth Olympic Games. And that's sort of why I got into show jumping.
How do you know that you're a dressage rider or like a show jumping, like a show jumper? Like what is it that maybe the question would be, what are the skills that you need to have to be one or the other?
Communication with the horses is always paramount. How you do that differs a little bit between show jumping and dressage. So in dressage, there is a lot of, fine tuning the very, very small elements of each movement to try and increase your score. So there's a lot of refinement, there's a lot of nuance, and horses, every day they're a little bit different. So every day you have to slightly adjust to bring out the best in a horse. With show jumping, they actually don't know the obstacle course in advance. What happens is the rider gets to literally walk on foot through the course, and then they have to guide the horse through it after. So it's a little bit more of you have this toolbox that you develop, but how you implement it, you don't actually know until literally an hour before you compete. So there is a bit more of that reactivity, kind of unexpected element to it.
And did you enjoy that, or you prefer that very subtle communication with your horse?
I enjoy them both, and I think that doing both made me a better horse rider. But I think with dressage, what I really enjoy is sort of, taking the time to know sort of every aspect of your horse and a routine and where the strengths and weaknesses are and how you kind of, do a bit of damage limitation on the weaknesses and maximize the strengths. It's all, there's a big kind of strategy to it. And I really enjoy that kind of long-term process.
The thing with this season is that we want to explore the topics that we're completely unfamiliar with or that I don't know I should know about. So sometimes I come into a situation where I don't even know what the questions should be because I don't know what I need to ask. When I hear you talk about, this relationship with your horse, it just baffles me because, I've never had to work with an animal before. So when you say, you're understanding the horse and its temperament and you're going to make adjustments, like, would you be able to sort of take me through that process of what it's like? Like, how do you communicate with a horse?
Yeah, there's like the short answer and then there's the long answer. So, horses are incredibly sensitive animals. They respond to your mood, your body language. Very, very small things can set them off in their environment. For example, like in the distance, a dog might start barking or might start chasing, say a rabbit or something. And that will be enough to set off a horse because they're flight animals, they're built to be very sensitive. And we as horse riders, we love that sensitivity. That's what makes them such good competitors. They're reacting to us, but that comes with its challenges, So you have to learn the technical signals, we call them aids, that will encourage a horse to, do the movements we want. But beyond that, there is an understanding of, their moods, their mindsets, how you use your own body language to reassure them, inspire confidence, really kind of be sensitive in your own handling of the horse so that they can then, deliver what you want.
Is there a signal that they give you to tell you that I'm scared or I'm not feeling good? Like, what is it that gives you that signal to tell you that, okay, today my horse is not feeling so good, and
Yeah.
what does he need? That sort
Mm,
of thing. Like how?
I mean, horses kind of indicate their state of mind through a number of things. How they're holding their bodies. Their ears are a little bit like a satellite. So, like,
Mm,
whether their ears are sort of pricked forward, it probably means something has caught their attention. If they're in neutral, it means they're probably listening to you. If they're flat back against their heads, they're probably a little bit agitated.
mm,
So it's a whole host of things. Like I would say in Paris, my horse had a little bit of stage fright in the beginning of our routine,
mm-hmm,
and he was very, very impacted by, the size of the crowds. He got a bit nervous, and there he showcased that by actually being extremely extravagant in his way of moving,
mm.
because I mean, he knew we were meant to be performing. He just was too nervous to understand sort of what I was asking for, and therefore started, getting more and more extravagant without actually sort of being attentive
You.
to me. Yeah. So
Mm.
that's what sort of a very well trained horse will do, because they're clever animals. They sort of will try their best to fall back on their training, but sometimes when they're nervous, this showcases itself in a very kind of odd way, or in a way that won't necessarily score us points.
And you knew that it was because of the crowd and not because he was, I don't know, jet lagged or something.
Well, he's usually a very, very solid competitor. He loves the competition arena. So it was a very uncharacteristic reaction from him.
Mm,
And we do think, I mean, it's the Olympic Games. There were 16,500 people. It was also, there was a heat wave, like 37 degrees. So there were a lot of things that were quite high pressure
mm,
on both of us, but especially him.
mm.
So we do think it was the atmosphere and the crowds.
I mean, since you talk about the Olympics, take me through that journey as well. I mean, first of all, I suppose there's so many things that I want to ask you, like, where's your horse based? And then, like, do you have to fly the horse in? Like, do you have to settle? Like, how does the horse get to go, sort of acclimatize and view the grounds? I suppose it's the entire process of the Olympic Games that intrigues me. Like this, you and your horse, do you sleep with your horse? Like, I don't know, to build that, to make your horse feel comfortable and know that you're there. Like, how does that work?
So with every kind of big championship, we have a really good team. I've been with the same team for 12 years now,
Okay.
since I went to England for university. Um, and the Olympic Games, the process really depends on where it is. So for Tokyo, the horses fly in advance, but for Paris, most of the horses were Europe based. So
Mm,
we drove. My horse is based in England with me.
mm,
So it was actually, relatively speaking, quite a straightforward journey. We basically drove from England to Paris 5 days in advance. You get a few days to settle the horse in, familiarize with the arena, and then you compete.
mm,
The main thing is you don't go into an Olympic Games cold. You've done a whole qualifying campaign with Zachmo, my horse. We've had him 2 years. And that's 2 years of getting to know his likes and dislikes, how he travels, what he likes to do when he settles into a venue. And that understanding all helps, because
mm,
every environment has its different challenges for a horse. But you learn enough about the horse that you know how to react yourself.
What is the journey to the Olympics like? How long do you have to train before you participate? Or is there like a weight that you have to keep or your horse has to keep? But how does that work?
There's no specified weight class or even gender category at the Olympics. So we compete as an open class, male and female, all ages. It really is just about your technical capabilities and whether you can sort of achieve the scores that mean, you know, you're in the top whatever of your of the class, sort of. In terms of the journey, to be honest, it's very hard to quantify because, as I said, I would say I started training much more seriously after I moved to England. So that was 12 years ago. Um, but sports is not linear. It's especially not linear in horse riding. There's no, you know, in sprinting, you might say, like, I want to improve by 0.x seconds per season and therefore achieve the qualifying mark by this year. With horses, because you're working with a live animal, they're not improving linearly and you're not improving linearly. So sometimes, like, you know, you could achieve a qualifying score in 1 year and not improve it for 3 years. Or, you know, you could have no improvement the whole season and suddenly get a 5 percentage point improvement within a month. So it's hard to quantify, but it's definitely a long journey. I think, you know, you've got to quite a few years in advance.
How did you feel? What was your emotional journey going to the Olympics?
So the Paris one was definitely challenging. It's my second Olympics. Tokyo was a very odd experience because, firstly, we qualified last minute. There was a withdrawal, and therefore kind of a spare place that we really only qualified for 4.5 weeks before the Tokyo Olympic Games. So a very, very short trajectory. And then we had a technical elimination, which does happen. But obviously you never think it will happen to you, especially on such a big stage. So there were a lot of like kind of unexpected emotions because the whole thing was quite compressed and a little bit of a roller coaster. So Paris was, I would say, not the complete opposite, but we were much more prepared. We were very intentional. We sort of had more of a build up and also had spectators. So, you know, my friends and family came to watch. And as I said, it was a capacity crowd of 16,500 people. That all makes it a very different environment and very sort of, you treasured it a lot more, or at least I did, because you sort of don't take for granted, you know, how big an event the Olympics is. It only comes around once every 4 years. And it was really quite special to have all my sort of friends and family there with me this time.
You know, this is the first time we've met. So we've never also had any conversation before this. And I look at you and I think you're such a calm and chill person. But you are in a sport that is so highly unpredictable and in a profession that is so, I think it's highly charged. I mean, I'm not in the profession. I'm just assuming, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that it's just also a very high stress, high pressured environment. And yet you're able to keep so calm and so composed. Like, how do you do that? and what would attract you to be in this, you know, to be in this environment? You know, first the unpredictability of working with an animal, and then in a very high pressured environment of being a solicitor.
I'm not sure.
Have you always been like that when you were a child? Like very calm and very chill and just
no, not
very
at all.
composed?
I would say until I was about 14 or 15 years old, nerves were a really big problem for me when I rode horses. I got really, really nervous. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I was always trying to do really well and probably not in a very constructive way. I think actually both competitive horse riding and being a lawyer are, as you say, very high pressured environments. There is a reactivity to, what the client wants. There's also a reactivity to what the horse is like on a given day. And in a way, coping with what we call like the day-to-day crisis situations at work has been really good training for horse riding and vice versa. Because as I said, like generally speaking, sort of getting nervous or freaking out will not improve your situation. And you'll learn that very quickly
Yes.
in both settings. So the only chance you have of improving your situation is actually staying calm and being very, sort of very disciplined in what you can or can't change. So in, say, a horse riding context, I can't magically fix the fact that my horse is scared or nervous, but I can give him the reassurance and the familiarity of what we've been training on to get him out of that mindset of nervousness.
Like, what do you do? Is it like a little, or you
Like
yeah.
you kind of so we know each other very well. We have these very small things you do, for example, not the actual movement, but to prepare for a movement. And those things are like breathing to us. So we do this thing where I will slightly vary the tempo of a trot. And every time he varies the tempo and responds to what I'm asking for, I'll reward him. And it's very small. You can't even see it as a spectator. But those small things give him something to focus on, reassure him that he's doing a good job. And through that, we actually got through a lot of the tension.
How do you reward him? Like a pat on the back, literally?
Yeah, you can just like pat him on the neck. Sometimes I speak to him. You can't do that in the actual competition venue, but like before you actually start your routine, I'll speak to him in a reassuring way, or like reward him, like, just say good job, or and he reads that into your body language. And like, and this is a really big thing. Like, if you yourself get nervous, you will exacerbate the situation because they are nervous animals. They'll respond to your body language and think that there is a reason to be scared. If you try and sort of clamp down on them or punish them, they'll get even more scared because that's really sort of not what our sport is about. It's more about kind of harmony, understanding them, enabling them to do the job we're asking them to do without frightening them. And I'm not a very big person. I'm quite small as things go. My horse is really tall. Like, kind of forcing him to do anything is not really going to work for me. So you have to balance all these things when you're trying to figure out how to solve the issue constructively. And you're not going to be able to do that if you're not calm, if that makes sense. So it is very necessity driven.
Hey there, if you're enjoying the episode, show some love. Hit that like button on YouTube and give us a 5 stars on Spotify. Your support means the world to us. Let's get back to the episode. Singapore is a very land-scarce country, so I will probably have to take you back a little bit because Singapore being such a land-scarce country, not many of us will be able to own a horse. So how were you able to do that with the resources to be able to train, to own a horse? And where did you do that?
I mean, with a lot of support and stubbornness from my parents, I think. They were really very, very supportive growing up. I think my mom especially definitely wanted us to have an outdoor sport alongside our academics.
Right.
And we just loved horses. I'm sure you might be able to empathize, but like they're just they kind of capture the imagination. You know, we'll watch Lord of the Rings and like, you know, the horses are beautiful and things like that. So we loved horses as a family. And it became, you know, our weekly family outing. We would go to the Singapore Polo Club and have a group lesson, myself and my siblings. My mom would come and watch. And it just sort of grew from there. I think horse ownership in Singapore is, of course, a huge challenge. It's not just the land scarcity, it is the infrastructure of coaching, veterinarian services, you know, everything to make the horse comfortable and perform optimally is challenging and expensive. But I mean, we were really passionate about it. And we're really lucky my parents were willing to sort of support that passion. But it got to the point where we did have to combine it with overseas training. And I moved to England primarily for the horse riding and things like that for university and horse riding.
Where do you do horse training in Singapore?
So I grew up riding at the Singapore Polo Club. I also for a time kept horses at Bukit Timah Saddle Club, which used to be in Fairways Drive. I think it moved to the Turf Club area. So I do think riding is in a little bit of flux in Singapore. I would admit I'm not the most up to date with knowledge, but you know, space is obviously a huge concern for the community.
So when was that when you moved to England for the horse riding part?
In 2012, I went to Bristol University and I had my horses sort of 45 minutes drive away. So from there, I would say was really where we started pushing for more international standard competitions. And that is what opened the doors to eventually qualifying for the Olympic Games.
Would you then say that it's just because it's the only sort of animal that you were exposed to since young, so you just naturally get into it?
I have dogs as well.
Like, were you ever afraid, like as a kid, that you know what I mean, like that you get thrown off a horse, you fall off, like, oh my gosh, the horse is gonna bite me, and it's gonna kick me, or like all of that concern, you know?
Yeah. Actually, you are probably right. When I was very young, so I'm the youngest child in my family. So my parents let me start riding at 5 years old, which was like
Oh, that's
quite
really
young.
young.
And I do think there was like one period of time where um, I was riding a very irascible kind of school horse. A riding school is where you learn how to ride. So I was riding one of the school ponies. Um, and I think I fell really badly and got it and was accidentally kicked, like trodden on by the horse as I fell off. Yeah. And then like you do get a bit worried.
I mean, not you, but I'm sure your parents must be worried sick. I mean, at that time, you were the victim. I mean, there wasn't all that thought process there, right? I mean, I mean, I'm coming from a parent's point of view, and I'll be like, if that's my daughter, thrown off, 5-year-old thrown off a horse, and then being trotted on, I'll be panicking.
I mean, I think my mom has a really robust approach to life. So I don't, as long as nothing is broken, she's actually fine with it.
You wouldn't know, right? I'll be like freaked out. But okay, yes.
Yeah.
So then you fell, and then you but nothing was broken?
No, I think I just got some like bruising and stuff. And we were all like, my siblings also horse rode, and you know, we were very invested in this idea of like, you know, just get back on and keep going. So yeah, there was sort of that element of, again, as long as nothing's broken, you know, we're okay.
Does that apply then to the other parts of your life as well? Like, you know, when something doesn't work out, it's all right, we'll just get back on and figure it out again?
I think there's definitely an element of that where, you know, with sports, you're always trying to win. Like, that's undeniable. You're always trying to get a new personal best, do maximize your capabilities, get those incremental gains, which will determine whether you are one of the top international competitors or, or whether you will fail to get into the Olympics. Those things really matter. But you also learn about all the times where things were outside of your control. Like you were competing, there happened to be some kind of category storm that hits at the time you're competing, and therefore it was very challenging conditions to perform well. Or, there was once I was in Austria and it was 43 degrees and, we were physically incapable of, performing at our optimal ability because it was too hot. So
but the show must go on.
The show must go on, and you have to find a way to, take the learnings without getting too discouraged.
Wow, this is
So yeah, you do
wow.
just bounce back from things. And I think that's really important generally in work or in life. You have to retain that perspective, work really hard and pull out all the stops, but also just let go of the outcome a bit because some things were just not there on the day.
Would you say that it's pretty much because of this relationship with a horse and your experience in this sport that has taught you that?
I think it's definitely been a big part of that because sports heightens everything. It concentrates all the experiences because, for example, the Olympic Games comes around once every 4 years. If you fail to qualify that's a huge goal you've missed and a huge goal you've been working towards for at least a 4-year cycle, if not longer. So sports heightens everything and makes you feel that more acutely. But in a way, that's just another aspect of what you would learn in other aspects of your life.
Were there any learnings that you took away from, the many, many failures you must have had as well throughout this process of working with the horses and training together with him?
I think a few. I think that the first one is you need a really, really good team around you that will help you dissect the failures and figure out what was, within our remit that we have to work on and what you can attribute to just lack of experience, a freak accident, all these different things. And you need people around you that you can trust to have very difficult and frank conversations, but not to blame anyone. And that's really important, no matter, every time you're trying to achieve something sort of a bit niche or, something a bit abnormal, you need very good people around you to help you do that. And not just to prop up your ego, but also to be genuinely supportive and critical at the right times.
When you talk about your riding team, who are the people in this team?
So I have what I call my day-to-day coach. His name is Matt Frost. He's the one who trains me every day, devises, what programs we need to undertake to sort of improve my skills, improve the horse's fitness, and eventually, do well at competitions. I also have a strategy coach. His name's Adam Kemp, and he does the long-term planning. For example, if we want to qualify for an Olympic Games, that's a 12-year campaign period. He will chart what competitions we need to do over that 12-month period so that we kind of achieve the end goal. My horse has a groom. That's her name's Rachel. She is in charge of his daily welfare. So we'll take him out, tack him up, groom him. Make sure he's getting his vaccinations and all of these
Eating healthy, pooping healthy, and all that.
Yeah, keeping an eye on him day to day. I would say my mother is also really key to sort of managing all of this. And, um, doing very sort of logistically nightmarish things like
Wow.
ensuring everyone gets to the right place at the right time
Wow.
and things like that. So that's sort of the team that make up sort of a big campaign like that.
Are you usually open about how you feel of like, for example, like, you were really disappointed with yourself or like, you felt that you could have done like, would you share this part with anyone?
I'm probably not naturally inclined towards it.
Mm,
Um, but with like very close friends,
mm,
then I'm a little bit more open.
right.
But I think I'm incredibly task oriented, so I generally move on quite quickly to figure out what I can do to make it better,
Mm.
instead of dwelling too much on sort of that frustration.
The thing about sports, like Singapore doesn't have a lot of Olympic representation as well. And some people will attribute that to, the focus on academic here.
Yeah.
And a lot of other Olympic athletes or past ex-athletes have also shared that it's not easy, right? Training to be an athlete here in Singapore with a focus on academic qualifications and all that. But you sound like you've struck a very good balance. Like, what do you have to share when it comes to this perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is it is not exactly a zero-sum game. There are trade-offs, of course, with your time. I've been lucky that I'm in a sport where I don't have a short trajectory. I don't need to retire by X age. Do you know what I mean? Like
Ah,
there are, top riders who are, in their 40s,
right.
50s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a little bit more time, I suppose, or less time pressure
Mm,
than perhaps someone who is in gymnastics or
because your age and your body does make a
yeah.
difference to how you can perform.
Yeah. Well,
Is that what it is?
I think because horse riding, firstly, is a lot about developing a partnership with a horse. That takes many years. It's also developing your own technical skills as a rider, which
Mm,
also takes a lot of time. There's a lot of thinking that goes behind that. There's a lot that you can only gain through experience, and experience takes time. So, as much as I was really impatient growing up, I am a much better rider now than I was when I was 16
mm,
because of the experience and the time to develop the technical skills. I also think that because sports, especially mine, were so expensive, there was a very clear understanding between me and my parents that I would have to do well in school and not neglect a career to make this sustainable.
mm.
So, as soon as I could contribute to all of the training costs and all the rest of that, I would have to. So I think that always made me incredibly focused on maintaining like good academics, getting a good career, because I knew that was the route to continuing horse riding for me.
Mm.
A lot of people will do it differently. Some people will prefer to become full-time athletes, find sponsorships, find another way. But I suppose like the main takeaway is if you're passionate about it, you will find a way to continue. And like it might seem very different from what other people are doing. It might seem like there are a lot of roadblocks, but it is doable. Um, it's just maybe slightly more difficult in a society that's more focused on academics.
What would you say then that your years of working with horses has taught you about life or about animals?
The best thing about horses and animals in general is they don't overthink things.
Mm,
They're very much present in the moment. And what I enjoy most about horse riding and the training I still get to do is I have this kind of process where I put on my equipment, so my helmet, my boots, I get ready to start a training session. And in that, 3 or 5 minute period where I'm getting ready, I will empty my mind of everything else. And then I know for the next, hour, 2 hours, however long it will just be about me and the horse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a great thing to have when we're constantly busy, we're constantly bombarded by like social media, all like work stresses, all these different things. Like just be fully present in that moment
Mm-hmm.
with that living being that you get to interact with every day is sort of the biggest day-to-day gift.
What is like a misconception that people tend to have about horses or your sport, for example?
I think most people think dressage is like horse racing.
Mm,
So I think that is what people instinctively think of when they think about horses.
okay. Like horses, okay. Which one runs the fastest?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest single misconception. But yeah.
Because none of us ever thought a horse can dance.
Yeah, that's actually very fair. And I would say that's not limited to Singapore. That's also in England or in Europe or America. So kind of equestrian sports has only recently started growing in sort of its slightly more mainstream appeal and the general understanding of what we do.
What about the characteristics of horses or the personality of horses? Any misconceptions
Um,
or myths about them?
Everyone thinks the ponies are very cute.
You mean they're not? What do you mean?
They're like the smaller the horse, the more evil it is.
What?
Yeah,
What does
yeah,
that
really,
mean?
genuinely.
What does that
They're
mean?
they're just very cheeky. So like the ponies, like which is ironic because we teach kids to ride ponies,
Right.
but because of the size. But the small horses are generally like much, much naughtier than the big horses.
So what is like a naughty thing that they might
Oh,
do?
horses are always testing boundaries. Like they always are. Even mine. They'll just see if they can misbehave just a little bit. For example, you want them to go in a certain direction. They'll just test if they can diverge from that direction a little bit. And if you let them do that, then the next time it'll be a bigger divergence. And next thing you know, they're going in the opposite direction. So ponies reach that point much faster than horses. The moment a child sort of is a little bit doubtful about what he or she is asking the pony to do, they will take over and just, completely sort of think they are now the alpha in that
Right.
relationship.
Okay.
So which is amusing. Not for the child, but it's funny to watch. Whereas bigger horses, they are bigger, they're more powerful, but generally speaking, I found them to be much gentler and much more patient. Yeah.
I mean, a horse that's been trained for like racing or a horse that's been trained for dressage, is it the personality of the horse chooses the sport, or horses can just be trained into the sport that we want them to be in?
So racehorses tend to be only one breed of horse. So
Right.
thoroughbred racehorses. In the Middle East, there's some kind of Arabian horse racing as well, but they are bred specifically for the job of running. Equestrian horses are bred very differently. They're much heavier horses. They need a lot more muscle. So they do look physically different. And they've gone through sort of decades of breeding, mixing different kinds of horse breeds to generate these sport horses.
You mean there are horses that are just like blur?
Yeah, definitely.
Huh?
Yeah. Some horses
Like
are
you
just
can't
really.
communicate with them? Like
I
you just
mean,
like,
you'd never go as far as to not be able to communicate with them at all. But there are definitely horses who are a bit heavier and slower in their reaction.
when it comes to horses, and if any of us, we are going horse riding, any place, like what is that first introduction we should do with the horses that ensure that we are,
Yeah.
in a good space with them?
Yeah. So the you mentioned like how you approach dogs. It's the same with horses. So you sort of let them sniff your hand, and then try to avoid actually patting their head because they have a blind spot in the middle of their forehead. So actually, your first interaction with them should sort of be on the side. So the side of the head or the neck, because then they can see you better. And then once they kind of familiarize themselves that way, they'll tend to be calmer.
What is like a tip or something? Like when, you go on and then the horse isn't listening to you, like what can we do?
I mean, the thing about horses is
Like, can we talk to them and say, please calm down? Or like, I don't know. Does that work?
they don't actually understand the English words. They only understand your tone. But I think the main thing is try to sort of ask the person, facilitating the horse ride what the basics are. So if a horse is going backward, um, you have to apply your leg rather than the reins. Because if you kind of pull the reins, chances are it'll just go backward faster, things like that. So just try and get a couple of tips before you're actually on the horse.
Right.
And that will just help because they are trained in a certain way. They can misunderstand your signals. They're generally not trying to disobey you. It's just a miscommunication.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as someone who has been sort of breaking grounds in this, I would say, relatively non-traditional sport, what advice have you got for, our listeners who might also be on this journey, doing something that is out of the ordinary or out of the norm, not maybe even understood or supported by the majority?
I always say it's about pursuing your passion, but not in a blind way. Again, you've got to be intentional about it, be very clear about the reasons why you're pursuing it. And if those two things point you in that direction, then just sort of find a way to keep doing what you enjoy because it will end up, regardless of the short-term obstacles or long-term challenges, it'll end up being incredibly fulfilling, I think.
Would you say that's your experience?
Yeah. I always tell people I always felt and still do actually that I was a very sort of aggressively average sort of horse rider or student or any of those things. But I just really did persevere with it. And then who knows where you'll end up, I suppose.
And was there someone who sort of motivated you to continue persevering, or like where did this perseverance come from?
Not very sure. I think it helps to have very supportive parents. And by supportive parents, it's not blind support, I always found it quite important that they question things and important that they hold you accountable for your decisions. But fundamentally, I think all parents will try and be supportive to however much they can. They just always worry about whether it's a serious endeavor and all of that stuff. So I do think supportive parents are a very big thing.
Can you maybe go into a bit more specific, like maybe what are some of the questions that they've asked you, or something that they might have said to you to sort of get you thinking, about whether or not this is the sport for you, something like that, so that maybe the listeners, parents who are listening in, and they're thinking about how do I communicate with my child? How do I get my child to think and to hold them accountable? What does that look like? So maybe you can share a little bit more about, how did you stay so, to continue having this perseverance?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is with sports and with life, there are a lot of setbacks. There are moments where you feel like you might not be good enough or that the effort is not worth the result. And what I really appreciated with my parents especially is they would, sometimes sit me down and really sort of probe whether I still enjoyed the sport, whether I still loved it and wanted to pursue it. But also, what were realistic aims and, what they or I would have to do in order to achieve them. And, of course, you can always say that in an abstract way. For example, we all dreamt that maybe I would qualify for the Olympics, but it was extremely abstract for a very, very long time. I would say by the time I qualified for the Olympics, we'd probably all given up. So it's really the small sort of milestones that, you devise together that make that journey fulfilling and worthwhile and make you want to continue.
Now that we've heard from you about dressage as well as some of the lessons that you've learned, what is going on next for you? I mean, are you training for the next Olympics? Also in your professional career as well? Like, what is upcoming?
Yeah, so this past year has been a really big one for me. I think um, in terms of my career, I got a promotion to senior associate, and then in terms of horse riding, we of course qualified and went to Paris. So I'm not in any particular rush to make huge life decisions. I'm kind of really enjoying sort of what we're doing now. So we're still training. I'm obviously still working, but doing sort of enjoyable things, enjoyable competitions, enjoyable work until we decide sort of sometime, probably next year, what we want to do next. We're sort of in a really lucky position. Between Tokyo and Paris was only 3 years. But now with Paris, we're back on a 4-year cycle. So the running joke sort of within the horse community is every single person retires after the Olympics and then decides whether they unretire, about 6 months after. So that's sort of probably where I am at the moment. Not retired, we're still competing, but I'm sort of not in any rush to make kind of a future decision at this stage.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No worries.
Before you go, I've got a little gift for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So here's a little, it's a little gift in a big box for you. And
Do I open it now?
yes, you can.
Okay.
You have to leave the box. But so it's just a little gift. Just I think you being so busy and maybe you have to be under the sun and all that. I just want like a little self-care thing.
Wow. Okay, I feel like I need this.
You do? Well, it's a little tool to help you relax your eyes. Because I'm just imagining that in your work that you probably have to read a lot of documents. And
yeah, definitely. And like I am increasingly concerned about, the impact that has.
yeah, so I just a little thing for you to thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you
and
so
for
much.
sharing all the knowledge and all your experiences with our listeners today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Bye. There are some things in this world we'll never fully understand, but I'm incredibly thankful to Caroline Chu for taking me into the world of dressage. I've come to realize that it's not just about technical skill. It's about the deep bond between her, the rider, and her horse, Zachmo. It takes time, patience, and trust to build this connection. And perhaps we can think about how we too can cultivate meaningful relationships in our own lives. I hope today's episode has inspired you to appreciate the artistry of dressage and what it takes to stay on course, especially when you're pursuing non-traditional paths. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in the next episode of What Do I Know with me, Joanne Pei. Bye!